Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's Sunday morning here in London. It's just after 9 o'clock. This is Lizzie and Justin from Thirdspace, and we are here live, if you care to join us this week in our Facebook group, which everyone is so welcome to join. Just search for us at Turning Towards Life on Facebook, but we're also here recorded later in lots of places where you might be finding us on most of the podcast platforms, on Instagram. So welcome on YouTube, on our website, which is turningtowards.life. Welcome to all of you and to all of us, wherever really you find yourself. And Lizzie, I always think that we record this as well as it being live. I always want to say whenever as well, because you might be listening to this in April 2021, which is when we're having this conversation, but who knows, you might be listening to this weeks or months or perhaps even years into the future. So if you're a time traveler with us, or if you're here with us live, you're so welcome to be here. And this is the latest week in our Turning Towards Life project, which we've been doing, you and I, Lizzie, for a long time now. And it feels so exciting to me to be reading again a source that you've brought this week, Lizzie, and seeing what emerges from it. And before we do anything else, I also just want to say to everyone, if you are listening or watching this in April, on the 11th of April or thereabouts, 2021, next week, on Sunday, the 18th of April, we are holding our first ever Turning Towards live online event, which everyone is welcome to. And you can join us and come and be in conversation with us and with other people in the way that we've been doing all of these months. And just head over to turningtowards.life and you'll find all of the details there, and you can get yourself a place and come and join us next week.
Well, it's very exciting that we're going to be with people in a multi-way conversation like this. It's really exciting for me. So this week's source is called Questions to Ask When Waking, and it's by Bernadette Miller. And it goes like this. What would you do if you really knew that life was wanting to sing through you? What would you say if your words could convey prayers that the world was waiting to pray? What would you be if your being could free some piece of the world's unwhispered beauty? What would you stop to bless and caress if you believed that blessing could address our painful illusions of brokenness? What would you harvest from heartache and pain if you understood loss as a way to regain the never forsaken terrain of belonging? What would you love if your love could ignite a sea full of stars on the darkest night?
I'm going to read this as well. And for all of us who are listening to these words from Bernadette Miller, it might be a moment. You didn't already yet. Who knows what you're doing? You might be out for a walk, or sitting in a chair, or lying in bed, or who knows. Just see if you can soften yourself and settle yourself and pause yourself enough that these words from Bernadette Miller can really penetrate. Questions to ask when waking. What would you do if you really knew that life was wanting to sing through you? What would you say if your words could convey prayers that the world was waiting to pray? What would you be if your being could free some piece of the world's unwhispered beauty? What would you stop to bless and caress if you believed that blessing could address our painful illusions of brokenness? What would you harvest from heartache and pain if you understood loss as a way to regain the never forsaken terrain of belonging, what would you love if your love could ignite a sea full of stars on the darkest night?
Thank you, Justin. So in receiving this from us today, what's immediately with me is I have no answers to any of these questions. Like, they're not the kind of questions that seem like I'm supposed to answer them, but that I'm just supposed to keep asking them. And the way that this is written, I feel like it throws me into a world of possibility, so much so that there aren't any answers. And not that there wouldn't grow some answers if I kept asking these questions, but the immediate effect of it for me is stopping. Like, the questions themselves seem like reason to pause and wonder and let them be real questions that are quite different to the ones that I'm asking myself on a kind of day-to-day basis, which is like, it's probably my life, but what am I going to cook for Vesper for dinner? which is a great question, and it's needed, but it's like, this is a set of questions that's much kind of broader on a perspective of a life, rather than the everyday kind of immediate concern of being a human being. So I feel really taken by it and almost taken out of my habits by these questions. And it feels like there's beauty in them that leaves me kind of reeling around in a different realm. And that we could stay with this for ages and take each one of them and keep asking each other. I started kind of wondering what it would be if you just kept asking me, what would you do if you really knew that life was wanting to sing through you? What would you do if you really knew that life was wanting to sing through you? Like, I would like you to ask me that 400 times and see what it brought.
That would be such a cool thing to do.
Mm.
Just to sit, Lizzie, and ask you 400 times.
Mm.
Again and again and again and again. Just ask you that question and see what you had to say.
Mm.
And I imagine, well, because I can imagine, I feel in myself, even as you're saying it to me, I can imagine the bursting forth of both known and unknown responses that would come from the discipline of just that one. So there were lots of other questions here as well. But gosh, this morning, I'm so grateful for these words and for what you're saying about them, Lizzie. I can feel myself being invited and made hopeful and grateful and really tender with these questions, because one of the things that you were pointing to in what you were saying that I thought was so fantastic is to remind us, and I'm getting reminded, that I have a set of questions that are habitual, that I'm asking even as I open my eyes in the morning for the first time. I'm actually already in some kind of question each day. And my habitual questions, which go back a really, really long way, as far back as I can remember, like the habit ones, the ones that my body just does, are things like, how am I going to stay safe? How am I going to get everything done that is already pressing on me? how I'm going to make sure that people love me and don't abandon me, how am I going to be responsible enough, those kind of questions. And they're not even given language.
Mm.
And that's why one of the reasons I think this is so fantastic, at least for me, that Bernadette Miller says these are the things to ask when we wake, because for sure I'm already in a set of questions when I wake. Some of
Yeah.
them were born by my dreams, and some of them are born by the sort of habits of my body and the habits of my life.
Mm.
And mostly I don't actually know that I'm asking those questions, but when now I see it through the light of this poem, so much of the felt sense of my body, my mood of feeling frightened or feeling despairing or feeling worried or feeling pressured or feeling
Mm.
come because they're responses to being in a different set of questions which I don't have answers to, that I don't even know that I'm asking.
Yeah.
But actually, even this morning I woke up early and had a couple of hours available before we were beginning this conversation today, and I can feel the way my habits pull me into certain things. Oh, I should probably check if there are any messages from other people that need responding to. I should probably go and empty
Mm.
the dishwasher. I should probably, and all of those are fine things to do, but they're answers to different questions to these ones. So I'm letting myself feel into, if I just take this one that you suggested, that it would be good to ask 400 times
Mm.
just in a row. Gosh, how would I move into my own body? How would I orient to what is here around me? How would I greet? So sunny day this morning. How would I greet the sunshine? How would I
Mm.
meet the people that I love? And also, what might I practice that was oriented around letting life sing its song through me, that's different from the ordinary routines, which are a response to a different question.
Yeah.
And even, I have my own morning practices that I do often or sometimes. Um, Taken up stretching recently, which I'm really loving. But I noticed that stretching, if I do it, if I get up in the morning and really stretch, well, it's a lovely book on stretching, could be an answer to this question, but it could also be an answer to a different question, like how do I be a good person? How do I be a person who has things to practice? How do I,
Mm.
and even if I do exactly the same thing, the question I'm asking about the thing that I'm doing, like what if I was stretching in the morning or emptying the dishwasher or whatever it was, for the sake of finding out what life was going to wanting to sing through me, even the same
Mm.
activity would be a completely different thing. And that's so liberating and opening to
Mm.
feel.
Oh, as you're talking, Justin, I'm really sensing into this kind of subtle thing of how do I take my life lightly? There's a way that this poem kind of undoes the sense of burdensome responsibility of being a person. And it doesn't throw that away, because of course all those things are important. We need to take care of the things that come our way and the people, and but I feel very much invited to the realm of kind of joyful participation in life rather than fulfilling my duties in a kind of earnest way. And to hold everything as an invitation. So each line here I can feel is that what if my actions were oriented around life singing through me? What if the words I said were to do with what the world was praying for? What if my being was to do with revealing beauty? And it seems to allow space, like there's a deepening that happens that allows space for those responsibilities to exist and to be taken care of. But somehow, all of a sudden, I feel like I'm included in my life. Like I could be doing something, yes, to take care of my body, but at the same time, I could be including my joy and my frivolity and ridiculousness or something. And I feel kind of lightened by it, like there's much more included when I ask these questions than my habitual way of relating, like you were saying, to the things that are all those kind of everyday caretaking of life things. And so really asking these questions in the midst of those places when I'm, what would it be if I carried this question? What would I love if my love could ignite a sea full of stars on the darkest night? What if I took that question into a piece of work I was doing? What if I did a piece of work that I'm intimidated by and I feel worried by because it's hard? And then I ask myself within the work, what would I be if my being could free some piece of the world's unwhispered beauty? And if I let that infiltrate into my experience of a piece of hard work that's difficult and demanding, I could just feel like a spreading out of some different kind of experiencing than is normally afforded to me by doing that thing. So it's almost like injecting these questions into a kind of normal experience. And I'm also taking this when waking thing as, yes, when waking in from the night to the day. But also, I think we're waking up in all kinds of ways all the time to things. And in the waking up, it can feel quite scary and discombobulating and disorientating and all that. And so if I could bring these questions into all of the times that there's an opening where I'm waking up to something, like I could be waking up to something really hard to see and to admit. I could be waking up to something I really don't want to know about or to have to accept. And to bring these questions into those moments where things become undone feels so helpful. I just feel that if I could have the presence of mind to bring these to the places where things were falling apart, or so it seems, falling apart, maybe they would be coming together in a different perspective. But so much of the time, it feels like we could be afraid or worried or broken or traumatized or whatever it is. And these lines feel so supportive in all of that as well.
Mm. Yeah, I love this idea that these are questions to remember anytime we wake up into something.
Mm.
Now, in the early part of what you were saying, Lizzie, I got in contact in me with the part of me that the narrative of life as life itself as a burden and humans as burden carriers, and
Mm.
that my job is to somehow I have a job in the world that somehow to be useful or responsible or diligent or simply to
Mm.
carry a load a really long way or something. And all of,
Yeah.
like you said, all of those things can be true. But there is another whole account of being a person that's possible in the midst of pretty much whatever else we find ourselves in the middle of, which this is pointed to so beautifully by these words, which we can wake up into, which is, what if we were all of these in some way, and each of course is particular, but all of them call me into what if I'm here to have something beautiful and necessary come through.
Mm.
It's just a really different way to my ordinary burden carrying ways.
Yeah.
That whole sort of we are objects or machines kind of story, it's so pernicious in our culture to not have this story, that we might be gifts, we might have gifts, and that our work might be to open to the gifts that there are to bring in any and every situation, and not turn away from anything, but to have something come through that was completely perhaps familiar or completely unexpected. It's different from the story of problem solving, or it's different from the story of getting it right. And it's, there was something in what you said, Lizzie, about waking up in the middle of things that had me thinking about, what about those situations where we know there's a conversation calling with someone that's going to be, we think is going to be really tricky, and we don't know how we're going to be in it. We don't even know if we can be in the conversation because it's filled with so many feelings that we don't want to have, and we feel unskillful, and we wonder if we'll hurt the other person or we'll get hurt ourselves, and if we'll be able to navigate it. And then we get afraid and approach it with, I'm too small, I'm too incompetent, it's too frightening. What if, for example, in a situation like that, we woke ourselves up before we went into the conversation, and we said, what would I do if I really knew that life was wanting to sing through me here?
Mm.
What would I say if I knew that my words could convey prayers that the world was waiting to pray here, right in this difficulty? What would I be if my being could free some piece of unwhispered beauty here? What would I stop to bless if I believed that blessing could address our painful illusions?
Yes.
What would I harvest from the heartache and pain I and the other person or the other people in this feel if we understood that this was a way to regain something that could never be lost, which is the terrain of belonging?
Mm-hmm.
They're all such excellent questions. Oh, and I have to read this one as well. What would I love right here in the midst of this difficulty if I knew that my love could ignite a sea full of stars? Like how differently I would come into that same situation, and I might also not avoid so much
Mm.
the things that I would ordinarily be frightened, feel burdened by, and feel like I've got some great responsibility to do it only if I can do it right
Mm.
somehow. If I could come into that self same situation with these questions, it's
Mm.
enormously supportive of our goodness and our capacity and our ability to navigate the unknown together, to stand in this.
Mm. As you were talking, I could feel a really big wave of courage coming over me, of like, oh, yeah, I could do those things that I'm looking at thinking, oh God, that's going to be hairy, or how the hell am I going to handle that one? And to let these questions live right next to me as little prompts of presence, of wisdom that I can employ in any moment, feels really, really supportive and emboldening and kind of encouraging. Really amazing feeling of like I might be triggered, I might be kind of taken out in a conversation, and there's lots more that's here than just that. I think I'm continually trying to address contraction, address my smallening by trying to grow in those moments. and it's hard. When our buttons are pushed and we collapse into the same position, or we take the same place or the position up that we have always taken. What is it to practice into a realm again and again and again that is less contracted, less fearful, less defensive, even just by a tiny bit, so that we don't have the same old happening in our lives, but that new horizons can be born out of the very places that it all feels the same every day. And these questions kind of popped into that place where it feels like everything gets smaller and I get more habitual and more ingrained and more righteous and more taking up the place I think I should take. Just letting these questions and what you've said just kind of wash into those places. And I really believe, like, when we have these conversations, the language that we use really does pave paths for me. So the fact that we say what we say doesn't mean that it's done, but it means it creates the possibility of something happening along the lines of what we're saying. And it feels very integrating to be in the conversation, so that as those times in life arise, there are some options available. Because so many times, when we're in trouble, and when it's too difficult, and when we're wounded and it's all gone wrong and horrible, I just always feel tiny, weeny, shut down, small, defensive, angry, just like a kind of like a popcorn kernel of a person. And that's all that feels possible right there. And it's horrible. It's really, really painful. And I'm not thinking that those things are going to go away, because it seems to me that they keep coming. And I'm given up hoping that I'm not going to be hurt again, or I'm not going to be in pain again. I think I just am. But when there is ways of bringing different things to that popcorn kernel moment, and having different possibilities than just that there's more happening in that moment, and really believing that and practicing that, there is learning that can happen from those moments, and different possibilities arrive from those moments, rather than just the kind of victimness of it, and the feeling like the circumstances got a hold of me and there's nothing that I can do. And knowing that my being has all of this imbued in it, in spite of the way I'm experiencing life right now, this is also true. So when we pave the way for us to be in contact with those different possibilities by talking about it like this, I feel like, yeah, the pathway is there for me, and I can remember it, and I can take it, and I can relate to those moments and those happenings in very different ways.
This is also true, what you just said. And I had the strongest sense as you were talking that this project of undoing contraction, of noticing contraction and undoing it, is really another way we could have called turning towards life that. because it's the work of noticing our shrinking away from what's here, and instead going, well, this is also true. I am also the one that life is wanting to sing through. I am also the one that can convey prayers that the world is wanting to pray. I am this and this. This is happening and this. And I could feel myself getting about 2 inches taller whilst you were speaking, Lizzie, which I was so grateful for, because I recognise that this cowering in the face of the world, shrinking in the face of the world, is really familiar for me. It's a really habitual, I've done it since I was very little. And what comes with it is a story of, I won't be able to cope with this. It's beyond me. I won't be able to face or feel what's here. and therefore I must do everything I can to shrink away. Lots of us have that strategy. Let's make ourselves smaller than ourselves in the face of it. So I'm to have a different story about what we are, one that says, yes, this is true, what's here, what I'm feeling is true. And what would I do if I really knew that life was wanting to sing through me in this moment? It's a reclaiming of our own dignity and our own agency and our own beauty, which we always had, which was gifted to us simply by being here, but which we've got all kinds of stories that we invent and which get told to us that strip it away from us as if it weren't true. We can reclaim that, and we can also reclaim it on behalf of others as well. Like, what if I knew that the person who I'm going to speak to is also someone who life is wanting to sing through?
Yeah.
We can reinvest ourselves in our own understanding and our own appreciation of ourselves, and we can reinvest others with the depth that we are and the beauty that we are and the aliveness that we are, right in the midst of whatever we're in. We might be in sort of the midst of ecstatic joy, or we might be in the midst of great disagreement and difficulty, or we might be in the midst of loss and grief. And when we remember that we are, as well as that we are all of this too, dignifies us and sanctifies us and opens up creative paths for responding that aren't available from the only to contract away from life. So I'm what a way to begin the day. To be in this conversation.
Oh my goodness. I'm so grateful, Justin, and I realise we're kind of near the end of our time, and I'm feeling all kinds of sparks flying around this way that we might see each other as well, and how these two things are probably, by the nature of this whole thing, a simultaneous situation. As in, when I allow myself to let these questions live in me, I allow them to be true for other people at the same time. Like, you can't separate those things out. And so then, I feel myself wanting to breathe a little more deeply and relax into these truths and just kind of take my hands off everything, just let it all be imbued with these questions. Let all the relationships, all of the happenings, all of the questions, let these questions be there too. So thank you, Justin, for being in this today with me, and I'm grateful for our conversation as always. And we'll be back next week, which will be the session before our live event in the same afternoon, which is very exciting. So we'd love to see you there with us if you fancy joining in. And if not, we will just keep on seeing you back here on Sundays.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
Lizzie.